why don't we do a quick ranked season list of all the seasons from the history of the show. I wasn't exactly going to do this because I wanted to take a little more time to go in depth, but I had someone in a private message reach out and say, are you going to do a ranked list of everything? And I originally wasn't going to do it, but I figured it's Power Ranger Week. It's National Power Rangers Day. How could I not do it for our first main event at Knights of the Dirty Table? I got to go out with a bang. So let's start with this. At the very bottom, oh, and before I forget, some of the seasons, the stories have kind of like spread out across like 2 years because that's how Nickelodeon wanted to produce their seasons of Power Rangers. I'm joining those together. So any season that has a super counterpart to it that's spread across 40 episodes, I'm combining that as one complete story because I think that's the most fair rather than judging 2 sets of 20 episodes each because I don't think that's right. So at the very bottom, I have Power Rangers Ninja Steel / Super Ninja Steel. The only good thing that we had going for this season really was the 25th anniversary team up, which was only 1 episode, but I still thought it was good, all things considered. It got Tommy back for the episode, and it got a whole bunch of other veteran Rangers from various eras and seasons of the show. So there was like, I think 12 Rangers that fought in the team up, maybe like 15. I'm not quite sure. I don't exactly remember the number. I think it was good, all things considered, but every other aspect of the story with this, it felt pandering to kids. They were really going to drill in the lesson of the day through everything, and just the stakes never really felt high. The status quo was reset multiple times, and I never felt really attached to the Rangers. It was bland, and I would rather it have been just bad, but it wasn't even bad. It was just bland and boring. After that, I have Power Rangers Megaforce and Super Megaforce, second to last. Now, we did talk about this the other day, where Super Megaforce was just bad on so many levels, so many fronts. It threw away its 20th anniversary and kind of just crapped on it, so it was very disappointing, especially based on the footage that Super Megaforce is based on, Gokaiger. And we talked about that. Feel free to go back and check one of our earlier streams on that. But yeah, it definitely disappointed in its 20th anniversary. There were a couple of highlights where returning actors came back and actually did good, strong characterizations of their characters from less than 10 years prior. So there are some highlights, but not nearly as much. I won't go more into detail on that. Feel free to check out the previous stream from Super Megaforce. After that, I have Power Rangers Samurai / Super Samurai. You notice there's a trend that most of the Nickelodeon seasons are on the bottom of this list. Samurai Super Samurai, it was heavily based on its Super Sentai counterpart, where it's basically just a samurai story. So a lot of the stuff didn't quite translate as well in the language. They almost like, from what I learned from the production stuff behind the scenes, the showrunner for Power Rangers at the time, he would take the scripts from the Japanese stuff and word for word translate everything into the American stuff. So that's why some of the lines just feel really clunky. While it is a complete story as opposed to the previous 2 sets of seasons that I mentioned, it's not great. The characterizations aren't strong. There's way too much focus on a Red Ranger, and I'm sorry, the actor doesn't quite deliver. Actually, the season or the story gets more interesting when the Red Ranger switches over to a female Red Ranger, because she's actually a bit more of a stronger actor, and I kind of wish that she had been the franchise Red Ranger for those seasons. And that you just go off of what you got from the Japanese stuff, but I don't have Samurai and Super Samurai ranked highly in that regard. After that, this is going to be a bit of a controversial take for any diehard fans. After this season, I have close to the bottom Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1. Obviously, it's super nostalgic. It started all of this for everyone, and obviously we have to give credit to that. But overall, it's all very episodic, singular stories, and almost all the teens all the time are doing something community-oriented. It's almost as if the world's not going to end. We're going to clean up the park. Oh, there's some putties. Pow. Take out the monster. Pow. Form the Megazord. Slash the monster. End of the day. I think the only story that had stakes in the entire... 2 stories that had stakes in the entire season is obviously the Green with Evil arc, as I mentioned, one of my favorite sets of episodes in the history of the show. And then near the end, when Goldar is actually piloting his own Zord to take out the Rangers, that's where the stakes are really high, because it does feel like the world's actually going to end. But that's it. Everything else is just pretty self-contained. After this, also closer to the bottom, I actually have the following season, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 2. while there are some stronger arcs as far as the White Ranger arc, the return of the Green Ranger arc was pretty cool. I do think there were some moments such as the Zed and Rita wedding in season 2 that felt very off. Rita was basically done away with at the start of season 2, and when she came back, it was as if the Rangers didn't exactly care. Now, to be fair, while the reason why they shot the wedding was, one, because they were trying to make Zed more kid-friendly for the show, and two, while they were filming all the episodes for the Rita and Zed wedding, they were filming on location in Australia for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie in 1995. So all of these production factors get factored into the writing, so I do have to take it into account, but it still proved to just be very weak, and there really wasn't that much else interesting stuff going on in the season. After that, I have Power Rangers Zeo. And what's interesting about this season is at the end of Power Rangers Season 3, the base gets destroyed and they lose their powers, which happens typically in every show, but this is one of the few times where it crossed over into the following season. And once the Rangers got new powers based on the Zeo Crystal and, you know, all these, if you can't tell by sidebar, I'm wearing my Zeo Morpher today because I'm wearing a Tommy stuff. They got their powers, and then they went back to more episodic stuff. But what was really weird about the start of the Zeo season was that it was way more comical than it ever had been on Mighty Morphin, oddly enough. The plots, what the actors were doing, it was very strange. However, the second half of the season got interesting, as I mentioned in the previous stream, with the Gold Ranger arc leading up to Jason's reveal and then to the end of the season, where they actually took more elements of the overall Power Rangers universe and started playing around with it more. That also includes the team up with the Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers, the Aquitar Rangers. So the second half is good, but the first half really just drags it down. After that, I have a little higher up than the other Nickelodeon seasons. I have Power Rangers Dino Charge and Super Dino Charge. And I think this was the strongest output of actors that we got from the Nickelodeon seasons. I mean, it's no surprise that, you know, we continually like seeing them at cons. They were asked to come back for the recent Power Rangers Beast Morphers team-up that involved all the previous Dino-themed teams, which is a really cool concept based on the Japanese footage. While the villains are a little weak overall, I give a huge credit to the cast for just portraying their characters in a much stronger fashion than some other Power Rangers seasons. And it does, in fact, tell a complete story at the end. What has it at the bottom for me, or more towards the bottom for me compared to other seasons, is the end of the season. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. They basically rewrite time so that dinosaurs now live on Earth with humans. And at the time of the show, everyone thought, does this ruin every set of continuity standards that we had for Power Rangers? Like, without dinosaurs, there's no Mighty Morphin team. There's no Dino Thunder team. There's everything kind of goes away. It wasn't until like a few months afterwards, not even a few months afterwards, like I think a whole year afterwards, that it was established that this season takes place on a separate Earth. But for a whole year, everyone was just scratching their heads of what's happened to Power Rangers? What happened? After Dino Charge and Supercharge, I have Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 3 / Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers. That was like a 10-episode mini arc, so I don't want to count it as its own separate thing, so I'm just merging it all together. Season 3 had way more multi-part episodes, like Part 2, Part 3 stuff, so I give it a lot more credit for like really trying to raise stakes in certain sections of the show. And, of course, the finale at the end where they lose their powers and the base gets blown up, I think adds for some high tension for the franchise. And I also am giving credit to what the Alien Rangers and their arc did for the show, was basically creating a whole story that was told from beginning to end over the sake of the 10 episodes, which I thought was really good, all things considered. It's the 90s, so it's still very light, but I consider it higher up than the first 2 seasons of Power Rangers because they did at least try to raise the stakes a little more. After that, I have Power Rangers Operation Overdrive. When the season first came out, I was also one of the kids that felt like, yeah, this is kind of the worst season we've ever had of Power Rangers. It was the 15th anniversary, and it just felt weaker in comparison. But now as I watch it as an adult, the idea of having Power Rangers on like a Indiana Jones kind of thing where they travel around the world and they find artifacts, it's amazing what they were able to do on the incredibly low budget that they had, because obviously the show is notorious for a low budget. The second half did more interesting things than the first by, spoiler alert, making the Red Ranger a cyborg and having that difficult conversation with his dad of, wait, you built me, I have all these memories of being your son, but none of these memories are actually mine. I'm only 2 years old, not 18. That does a lot to someone's psyche, and they actually played it rather well on the show, shockingly enough. And I
can say that awkward conversation with everyone has to have with their father. Dad, am I a cyborg?
It was actually a really dramatic moment for the show that I thought played well, and I didn't notice that until I was older. So I give a lot of credit for the second half of the show, so that's why I have it higher. After that, I have Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. The first season coming back after Power Rangers' initial cancellation. They only had 4 months to shoot and put all this stuff together. The production budget was really high. There were a lot of things that they shot for the American stuff. I mean, they had a giant spaceship with rooms and revolving doors and all this stuff. There was some clunkiness midway through the middle of the season. Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, they wanted to take into space, where the Japanese footage for that was based in the jungle. So obviously those two sets didn't quite match up, but they made it work, all things considered. And I give credit for their high production budget and value. And they also had a really cool team up with the In-Space Rangers, and they fought the Psycho Rangers, and it was really dope. And I have to give credit to them actually writing off and killing a Ranger. They killed off the Pink Ranger, but that was because the actress Valerie Vernon was diagnosed with leukemia. But eventually they brought her back at the end, and everyone was happy. But they killed a Ranger for the first time, which was pretty dope. After that, I have Power Rangers Turbo. This is another case where the first season was really clunky. Any dramatic tension from the previous season was gone. The first half of the season, every episode revolved around finding a bomb, and it was one of the most mundane and annoying things I'd ever seen from a kid's show. After they actually fired the writers and the showrunners from that season, because they also were realizing that this is not good writing, they fired them, brought in new showrunners, and then they also changed over the cast as well. Tommy was a Ranger at this point. Adam was a Ranger. They all decided to leave the show, brought in a new cast, and oddly enough, the writing got a whole lot better. Way more dramatic tension, and as I mentioned the other day in my favorite episodes and such, it all led to their base getting destroyed, really for the first time, with no sense of hope, and it followed into the next season. So the second half was really strong, and I give them a lot of credit. After that, I have Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, the first season that I had ever watched that day that I discovered Power Rangers. While they don't quite do as strong with their 6th Ranger stuff, they really have a nice strong core of 5 Rangers that take on the Demon Army, and they established that the Demons were a group of villains that you did not want to mess with, and also high production value too, shooting in LA, so I have to give them a lot of credit for that. After Lightspeed Rescue, I have Power Rangers Mystic Force. Now, oddly enough for this list, I actually have a lot of my Disney seasons higher up on the list than various other ones, and some people maybe will disagree with me on that, but I actually think Disney did a good job with writing their shows compared to previous seasons. Mystic Force was cool because it was an adventure series, kind of if Lord of the Rings had magic in some way in terms of establishing its characters and setting up these magical worlds and such. I think they did a really good job with the writing for the show. Everything was actually really well paced for the first 31 episodes. It was just the 32nd and final episode of the season that actually felt rushed, and they tried to do a lot in 20 minutes, but the pacing otherwise feels really good. After Mystic Force, I do have Power Rangers Jungle Fury, which is considered to be in my top 10 as opposed to the the power list that we saw from the villain stuff. I'm actually doing a current rewatch of Jungle Fury now, and I love the main core Ranger team. I think they're all strong actors. They have strong characterizations. I love the mentor. I really like the villains. I think they're a stronger group of actors than other incarnations, and I think Daishi and his actor, all things considered, it's evil for the sake of evil, but there are moments of humanity involved in that character, and those moments are played real by said actor, so I respect that a lot. And I just love the concept of taking your regular old henchmen, your grunts, and being able to turn them into powerful monsters and generals of the day. I just thought that was a really cool concept as a kid. After Jungle Fury, I have Power Rangers SPD, where that show takes place in the not too distant future. It was supposed to take in 2025. It's 2020 now. We're nowhere near that future, with flying cars and every alien in the galaxy using Earth as a home base. So we're not anywhere close to that. But I thought SPD had a really well-paced story. I do give it a little bit of a detractor for having their 6th Ranger, the Omega Ranger, be in the costume for the entire season and never have a live-action actor because Disney was just trying to save money. So that, I think, was a little bit of a piss-poor decision. But the core group of 5 is one of the most well-regarded casts in the whole franchise, and I absolutely see why. They really played well with each other.
Maybe he was morphing when the wind changed.
I got stuck. They worked it into the plot, so it did work, but I just, for the production standpoint, it was a cheap reason. Yeah, it was a cop-out. After that, I have Power Rangers Wild Force, which has 2 of the best team-ups in all of the franchise, Reinforcements from the Future, where they team up with the Time Force team, and also the 10th anniversary episode, Forever Red, where the previous 10 Red Rangers teamed up to take on the Machine Empire.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah, it's probably the best episode in the whole overall franchise, and it was so epic as a kid. And it still holds up. They wanted to do a whole lot more, all things considered, but the fact that they were able to pack that much into 20 minutes and having almost every original actor come back, Jason, Tommy, Wes from Time Force, and just everyone, it was a really, really cool episode. But aside from that, while the cast wasn't quite as strong as maybe other seasons, Master Orc gets a huge boost for the show because he was someone you didn't want to mess with. Certainly Zenaku, another villain. Like, their villains were really strong in this season as opposed to the heroes, and that's kind of what sticks out for me as one of my favorite touches on the show. After that, I am in the I'm now in the top 5. In case anyone's been counting or keeping track. At number 5, I have Power Rangers RPM, the show that I mentioned before that's set in the future where the Venjix computer virus has taken over almost all of Earth, and now there's a little dome. That's where the rest of the humans are, where it's, room temperatured and everything. And it was the bleakest. It's also set in a separate continuity from the main seasons, but just the stakes were a lot more dire. And they actually had a cool thing at the end where you couldn't tell if the Venjix virus was alive or not. They left it very ominous. And yeah, it's a stronger season. It's a strong cast. What sucks about RPM is that when it was broadcasting, they only, as I mentioned the other day, they only broadcast it to certain regions of the country. So if you lived in New York or California or Florida, you could see it, but the rest of us couldn't see the show. It was flabbergasting because Disney was basically trying to set up the show for cancellation. Basically, yeah. So that's my reason for it. But you can watch the show and all of these seasons on Netflix now. Hashtag promotion. In my top 4.
They have all of them?
They have all of them.
Nice.
That's a big reason for why there's been a resurgence in the brand, because everyone's been able to watch it all.
Yeah,
that's had a huge factor in it, and that was before Hasbro bought it. Coming in at number 4, I have Power Rangers Ninja Storm. I like how surprisingly comical it is and serious at the same time. Like, the jokes, when they land, they actually land. It's actually funny. But then the battles and the stakes are high enough where you remember that it's still an action-based franchise. It's it really does a good job of adapting its source material as well as adding in slightly newer American elements of humor and banter. And I really like that season. It held up a lot more as I watched it last year. It held up a lot more now than when it did as a kid, in my opinion. At number 3, I have Power Rangers Dino Thunder, where Tommy came back and was a mentor to the group of kids, as well as becoming a ranger in his own right. It's very well done. Some would consider this to be the best season, and there are plenty of arguments why. Strong villain, strong cast of Rangers. Each individual episode does a really good job of its character development for everyone. And it's definitely a must-watch. Definitely one that I would recommend if you're trying to start with the franchise from ground zero. It has a good recap of kind of everything up to that point for Power Rangers, and it is very well executed. And I would definitely rewatch it again. In at number 2, some people have this at their number 1. I have Power Rangers in Space. This was the season that was the culmination of the previous 5 seasons prior to that, and this was essentially their end game. They were facing cancellation. They wanted to take every concept that they had previously established and try to implement in as much as possible. Stuff from Mighty Morphin, stuff from Zeo, stuff from Turbo, and make it so they culminated in a big battle where everyone, it was all the marbles were on the table. We lose here, it's over. And they did a really good job of establishing new characters for this specific season, giving them enough character development, and still honoring previous characters that came before. It's a very strong season. Its payoff is good when you've watched the previous seasons building up to that, because you can clearly see that they at least were able to make something worthwhile out of everything that came before. And yeah, it's a strong season. Definitely one of the best the show has to offer. And to no one's surprise, based on previous streams, I have Power Rangers Time Force at number 1. Awesome villain, awesome cast of Rangers, awesome writing, really good production budget for the show, shooting in LA, all things considered, considering that how notoriously cheap the show is. It's my favorite and definitely the one that I would recommend the most to anyone. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on Time Force, feel free to check out that previous stream on YouTube. And I will briefly mention that while Beast Morphers, Hasbro's current season, is still premiering, I can't quite rank it in the listing just yet. I would definitely have it probably within my top 7, I would say, because it's done a really good job of also taking previous Power Ranger concepts from previous seasons, even some plot lines as old as 10 years, and adding it into this season. Like plot lines that never got resolved, they're adding it into this season to give that kind of resolution, and I think that's really, really cool. So I'll come back at some point and do another ranked list, but Beast Morphers is higher. Believe it or not, with Beast Morphers, they've actually shot more American footage than used Japanese footage, which is a first for the show. I almost can't tell what is the Japanese footage at this point because they've just been using so much American material, which is a credit to Hasbro. So yeah, that's my ranked list.
Whoa! Welcome to the end of the Knights of the Dirty Table video that you just watched. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to our channel, like our video, share with all your friends, and catch our live stream every Friday live at 5, only on the Zenden Studios Twitch channel. I gotta go wander off into space. See ya! Whoa! Whoa!